With the high volume of investments in merger and acquisitions over the years, a lot of organizations now are focusing on how to get more value out of their merger or acquisition. But how exactly do you get that sort of business value out of the integration of these acquisitions? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of their digital transformation success. And a lot of our clients, probably a slight majority of our clients, are organizations that are either owned by private equity firms or they're going through some sort of merger and acquisition. And in recent years, we've seen an uptick in merger and acquisition activity. And what organizations tend to struggle with as a result of that merger and acquisition activity is how to realize the business value of those investments. In other words, a parent company or a private equity firm has invested in another firm, they've acquired that firm or merged that firm with another one. How do we get the business value out of it? How do we get the ROI out of it? How do we maximize the efficiency gains that are possible as a result of that? And these are some of the questions that a lot of organizations have trouble answering and executing. So what I want to do today is talk about what some of the key tactics and strategies are for realizing business value as part of your M&A integration. The first tip to get the integration value that you expect out of your M&A activity is to have a clear integration strategy. And this is something that you ideally do as part of your thesis for why you're making the acquisition in the first place. So in other words, where is the business value? What is the unlocked potential that we want to tap into by acquiring or merging two organizations together? And this could come from operations, it could come from technology, it could come from organizational changes, it could come from increased revenue in new markets, it could come from just pure scale of the organization. There's a lot of different levers that can drive that growth or that increased value. But the key is that we need to define clearly what that integration strategy is, and we need to have that clear strategy going into the acquisition, but certainly when it comes time to create the value and integrate the different organizations, that M&A integration strategy really comes into play. So the first thing you can do is define that integration strategy and have a clear plan for integrating the organizations as part of your M&A integration strategy. In today's day and age, most organizations are behind in their technology investments. They've accumulated a huge amount of technical debt, meaning that they haven't kept up with technological advances in the marketplace, and most organizations are operating on outdated technologies that are holding them back and preventing them from scaling and growing to their full potential. And that, quite frankly, is why a lot of PE firms and other acquiring organizations are out buying these undervalued firms, is because they don't have the right technology in place. There's a lot they could be doing with technology, but they're not, to increase business value. And so therefore, an acquirer comes in with the intent of putting in new technology to either increase revenue and or to decrease cost and increase the overall margins of the organization. So one of the things you want to do as part of your value creation of your M&A integration strategy is to now look at your technical strategy, your technical roadmap, and your overall digital strategy for what is it we're going to do. What are the priorities for replacing technologies and putting in new technologies and new competencies to drive more revenue, reduce cost, and increase our margins? And ultimately, this all adds up to increased business value, which is what every M&A integration is typically focused on. And so the key here is to really define a strategy that prioritizes where the most business value is. So if your goals and objectives for the M&A integration strategy is to really ramp up revenue and to maximize your market share, then it might be that a CRM system or a customer relationship management system is a higher priority. If your strategy is to create more common business processes and to really drive operational efficiency across a combined entity, then it might be that a more traditional back office ERP system or a financial and accounting system is going to be the way to drive that efficiency and that operational consistency. If the organizations are having trouble attracting and retaining talent, it may be that HR technology might be the focus. But whatever the keys to growth are, or the keys to increase business value, you want to make sure that your technology investments reflect those priorities as well. Now, simply putting in technology without impacting the people side of change is not going to be effective. Putting in a new technology alone is not going to achieve and realize the business value that you expect from your M&A integration efforts. So to do so, though, we need to really look at the organization as a whole and marry the technical implementation plan with the organizational and cultural implementation plan. It's been estimated that 80% of mergers and acquisitions fail during the integration phase, largely because of the cultural mismatch. And so part of that organizational strategy needs to look at not only how are we organized as a team, how are the roles and responsibilities going to look in this combined entity going forward, but also how are we going to combine these cultures? How are we going to bend the cultures of the different organizations that we're bringing together to ensure that we're aligned with each other, but also aligned with our goals and objectives as an overall combined organization? These are just some of the things to think about. We also want to think about what the change impact is to the organization and make sure that we have an organizational change strategy that allows the people to come together into a combined, uniform, and aligned entity that is largely focused on achieving those bigger picture goals and objectives. Now, for more information just on this one tip around change management, I encourage you to download our organizational change management guide, which provides a number of best practices for how to do some of the things I'm talking about at a high level here. Some of the best practices and tips and lessons learned for implementing a change management initiative to help ensure that your M&A activity comes together. I've included a link to that below, so be sure to check that out as well. The next thing we need to do, which actually goes hand in hand with the previous point around organizational change, is to identify what the process improvements are going to be for the combined entity. It might be that we're going to consolidate processes. It might be that we're going to adapt the best practices throughout different parts of the organization in the combined entity. It might be that we're just going to totally re-engineer the combined entity's business processes. But whatever the case, we need to have a clear vision and execution plan for how we identify and implement those process improvements as part of the overall integration plan. And back to a previous point I made, and just to reiterate it here again, technology alone for technology's sake is not going to drive the business value you're looking for. You need to not only have the technological work stream addressed, the organizational change work stream, which I just talked about, but also the business process improvement work stream. And by the way, the organizational change work stream is dependent on making sure you have a clear vision of what you want your business processes to be so that you can roll those changes out to the organization, including those people that are impacted by the process improvements. Now, along with the process improvements themselves, you also want to make sure that you have clear KPIs or performance metrics for those processes. So if our goal is to increase throughput or reduce cycle time, we want to measure that. We want to measure where we are today and what we expect to get in the future so that we can hold people accountable in realizing that business case that we had going into the merger and acquisition. So we want to not only improve processes, but measure and hold people accountable for achieving those process improvements as well. Now, the last thing I'd recommend for an organization going through this M&A integration workstream is to make sure that you don't get caught up in a transformation money pit. Too often organizations go into these projects with unrealistic expectations or aggressive expectations, and then they mismanage the implementation, and it ends up costing a lot more time and money than ever envisioned, and it actually, in many cases, delivers a negative business benefit or a negative ROI. And that's typically the last thing any sort of private equity or finance person wants to hear as it relates to creating value in an organization. So even more so than regular or non-M&A sorts of organizations, you want to make sure that you have very tight project governance and risk mitigation mechanisms in place to ensure that your transformation doesn't turn into a big money pit. You want to make sure that you're doing the opposite. You want to make sure you're actually achieving and maximizing business value as a result of the combined entities, not just sinking a bunch of time and money into a technology initiative that isn't going to deliver business value. And so much of this comes back to the business case and making sure that we use the business case and the overall hypothesis for what kind of value we want to get out of the combined entity, using that as a mechanism for driving that project governance and decision-making process as part of the transformation. So for example, when it comes time to make decisions around should we invest in a new module or should we invest in customizing technology in a certain way that might be a little bit higher cost than what we originally expected, we need to be able to go back to the business case and say, does it enable the higher business benefits that we expected to see? If so, then maybe yes, the answer is we will invest in additional customization or additional modules of technology. But if the answer is no, then it might be that we don't do that. And without a clear business case and understanding of where the drivers of business value are, that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to do. So make sure you have a business case and a benefits realization plan as a way to drive that business value that you're looking for as part of your M&A integration. So these are some of the high priority tips that I would offer up to anyone going through any sort of merger and acquisition integration activity. But our team has also written a white paper and a guide to how to maximize business value in private equity and merger and acquisition types of environments. It's called the PE Playbook for Digital Transformation. And it's a resource that was written explicitly for private equity firms and organizations going through mergers and acquisitions, and helping give them advice on their digital transformation and their business transformation journeys. So I encourage you to check out that paper, download it, and read it in the link that I've included below. I've also included a number of other resources below that are designed to help you through your digital and business transformation initiatives. So I encourage you to check that out in the description field below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. Sometimes like halfway through, I realize I have no idea where I'm going with the sentence. I should just start over. The different organizations, that's when something is pretty important.